Hi everyone, in today's lesson we're going to talk about how to graph trigonometric functions with vertical shifts. So we've talked about a sine bx and a cos bx, but we haven't talked about this component plus or minus d at the end. So we know that the absolute value of a is the amplitude. We know that b is the number of cycles. And now we just need to talk about this component at the end, the plus or minus d. If we have a plus d, that means we're going to shift the graph up. If we have a minus d, that means we're going to shift the graph down. Okay? So let's analyze equations. So let's do this first one. So given this equation, negative 3 cos 4x minus 2, tell me what the amplitude is. Well, the amplitude's still in the same spot. It's the absolute value of negative 3, which is 3. The cycles are still the number in front of the x, which is 4. The period is still defined as 2 pi over b, where b is the number of cycles. So 2 pi over 4, which reduces to pi over 2. An interval is still defined as period over 4. So the period is pi over 2 over 4. Remembering that we can keep, change, and flip to simplify to pi over 8. Okay, now what type of vertical shift do we have? This is where we look at the outside, the plus or minus. So because it's a minus 2, that means the vertical shift is going to be down 2 units. So these next three parts, the equation of the midline, the max, and the min, can be seen if we just do a quick little sketch, which I'm going to draw over here. Okay? So we know, forget this part for a minute, if I just focus my attention on this graph, we already know how to graph those. We know that a negative 3 cosine graph will start down at 3, so down at negative 3, and go up to positive 3. So it would look something like this, but then this shift of a minus 2 means that every single point is going to go down 2. So my minimum, which is at negative 3, is going to go down 2, and my maximum, which is at positive 3, is going to go down 2. So basically what we want to do is we want to take the original maximum, which is 3, and we want to subtract 2. That gives me 1. Then we take the original minimum, which is here, and we're going to subtract 3 from that. So the minimum is negative 3, and I subtract 2. So the minimum is at negative 5. And then the new equation of the midline is very simple. It's just wherever the vertical shift is. So the equation of the midline will be the line y equals negative 2. So if I were to graph this new max and new min, my new midline would be at the line y equals negative 2. And we'll discuss this picture more into detail tomorrow, okay? Okay, I'd like you to try number 2 for homework, and I will go over that tomorrow in class, but I'm checking to see that it is complete. So again, please make sure you're doing number 2 for homework. All right, let's move on to the next page. Okay, now I'd like to show you how to graph a sine and cosine curve that has a vertical shift. So if this is the example that I want to graph, I still need all of the pieces that I did before. I need an amplitude, I need the number of cycles, I need the period, and I need the interval. So let's start there. The amplitude is in front of the number, so the amplitude is the absolute value of 2, which is 2. The number of cycles comes after the x, which is 2. period is defined as 2 pi over b, where b is the number of cycles. So 2 pi over 2, which is pi. And the interval is defined as period over 4. So the period is pi over 4 would be the interval. So this is what we are going to count by. So again, we're going to count 1/4 pi, 2/4 pi, 3/4 pi, 4/4 pi. Now that just gets us to 1 pi. We got to keep going. So 5/4 pi, 6/4, 7/4, and then last but not least, 8/4. Okay, so now we can go ahead and set up our x and y axis. So I'll put my y-axis here. And my x-axis there. Now I need 8 tick marks. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But the 8 tick marks usually go on the midline. But when we have a vertical shift, that becomes our new midline. So if we want to write midline, my new midline is going to be at the line y equals -5. Your midline is your vertical shift. So I can go ahead and go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and draw a line. Now you really should be drawing this line dotted because it's not technically part of the graph, which I can do here for us and make it dotted. And this is where we're going to start our graph now. So I need 8 tick marks though, so I'm going to count by 3s. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So those are my new tick marks. So this one I can count as pi over 4, 2 pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 4 pi over 4, and 8 pi over 4. Okay? So now I'm going to graph this just like I normally would. 2 cos 2x. So 2 means I have an amplitude of 2 from the midline. So my new maximum is going to be here, 2 above the midline. And that's where I start, because I know a cosine curve starts up at the amplitude and comes back down again. So I'm going to start here, and I have to go 2 below. 1, 2. So this one would be my new minimum, and this one would be my new maximum. Okay? So now watch, we're just going to follow the cosine curve. We're going to go down, down, up, up, down, down, up, and then up. There's one too many. So this is what my cosine curve will look like. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is do example number 2, please, down here for homework, and we will start there tomorrow in class. All right, have a good night.